This podcast has been brought to you by Monami.coach.
I am Priyanka Goswami, co-founder of Monami, an AI-based employee retention platform catering to well-being and engagement of workforce. It is indeed a pleasure to have Mr. Ashok Narain with me today. Ashok Narain is an ICF accredited executive coach and a leadership development facilitator. In his 40 years of vast experience, he has worked with many firms and MNCs. He has also been recognized as an influential thought leader, skilled in defining the big picture and inspiring action at the tactical level. Welcome, Ashok. How are you doing today?
Very well, Priyanka. Thank you very much for having me on this show.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine. So, Ashok, thank you very much for making yourself available for this podcast, which is on ways to invest in our leaders to survive the Great Resignation.
Okay.
Ashok, this is the time, this is the month of December wherein we reflect. And when I look back and see 2021, and to the extent 2020 as well, these 2 years were very hard to most of us in many ways, be it at personal front or at professional level. Everybody is adjusting with the new normal. The pandemic has changed the way of living. It has changed our priority from work to family and from profession to passion for many of us. Hence, we are in the middle of the Great Resignation. Now, the buzzword Great Resignation has become the talk of the town. And based on the various studies and the reports obtained, starting from McKinsey, Gartner, and many other such firms, we have understood that the primary reason for the Great Resignation is due to lack of work-life flexibility, toxic work culture, lack of empathy, and feeling undervalued. Ashok, I would like to understand that in this hybrid work mode, how managers or leaders ensure that their employees feel a sense of belonging at workplace.
Good question, Priyanka. The fact is that, right throughout, it has been always been imperative that employees are taken care of, and there is a lot of employee engagement practices in organizations if they want to drive, productivity, profitability, and a great environment to work in. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist today, and it has, it has existed in the past, but to a lesser extent. Certainly not to the extent that it should.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and look at organizations, everything has revolved around work life. So everything, your personal life has been pushed back. Work has become the predominant factor. And because of that, there have been a lot of personal sacrifices that people are forced to make.
Right.
Now, as of now, people have kind of survived with that. But what happened was that in between, you had the pandemic. And the pandemic, in turn, actually got people to sit back and reflect. They had a lot of time in hand. They couldn't go to work. There was a lot of fear from physical contact, about physical contact. Suddenly, what came into the forefront was about, is this really worth it? Why am I doing whatever I'm doing? Because family responsibilities and other accountabilities of a personal nature were getting neglected. And that wasn't kind of playing out. Also, if you really look at it, that what was really happening was that organizations were ruthless to a large extent in terms of exploiting their work schedules and their work dynamics, leading to a lot of frustration within people. So when you had this time to sit back and reflect, people actually started thinking about better ways of managing this. And therefore, you found a lot of people moving out and doing side hustles or freelancing, or you had this whole, back to their villages and townhouses, places of their residence, uh, because they just wanted to go back and be with family. There was so much frustration around. I don't know if I'm sure you're aware of the fact that 41% of the world workforce plan to quit. That's a huge amount. In America itself, where I am right now, 95% of the folks out here are planning to quit their jobs. In Germany, for example, 1/3 of the firms are facing work shortages. So, all I'm trying to get to is that the Great Resignation is no longer a buzzword, it's a reality. Yeah. Now, in terms of, well, if it is a reality, how do you kind of manage this? The only way you can manage is by ensuring that people you have, the talent you have, are in a more engaged form than they were before. Secondly, you have to ensure that you understand and accept the realities of the environment at this point of time. Yeah, where people are hesitant about working from in-office environments. People are a little apprehensive about what the virus could do to them or their families. You have mortality rates, because the virus, really shooting up. You have situations where people are going without jobs and they don't know what to do about that, right? And they're kind of helpless about it. So the talent which you have, what do you do with them and how do you engage with them has become a hot topic for discussion amongst corporates today. The only way to do that is to practice more humaneness. I think you need to be able to drive more engagement with the talent in various areas. So whether it is, truly understanding what the needs of the people are today, what are they really looking for? What do they really want, right? What are they ready to, work for with passion and motivation? I don't think the old order today stands true. I think people are questioning, the style of work. They want their autonomy, because of the pandemic and because of the fact that they were doing side hustles and they were freelancing. They enjoyed this whole experience of autonomy. They enjoyed the fact that they were on their own and they were not getting pushed around, for various reasons. So they really enjoyed that autonomy and they want that autonomy now in their work life. They want to see their careers grow. They want more flexible options available to them. And also in terms of, their mental well-being and their own health and well-being for themselves and their families, they are very keen to ensure that the organization is kind of has their backs and is taking care of them on that front. So a whole lot of new paradigms have come up, a whole lot of new thoughts have come up, and that is going to be critically important, to foster that sense of engagement. Not to mention the fact that I forgot to mention the fact, and probably a very important one, is that the communication between the organization and the employer needs to be, more vibrant, and it needs to be more productive, right? People want to know what's going on in the organization. They want to know what is the purpose of this organization. They want to know how are they invested into that purpose, right? What's in it for me is what they ask, right? So all of that becomes very important. And I think that's where the organizations need to focus if they really want belongingness and alignment, with the workforce.
So very good points, Ashok, as we were talking about engagement, complete paradigm shift, and a fair communication between employee and employer, between the associates and the leaders, the managers. This is all good, but I would like to understand, you being the leadership coach and the expert, how can we go about it organically at ground level? How can we bring that change? So if you can suggest some tools and techniques for our managers and leaders. I'll tell you how am I coming to this question. When I resigned from my settled banking career, it was because of poor work culture. the toxic work culture. And that time there was this phenomena that if you have a career break, there will be eyes towards you. People will ask questions why you have a career gap. But when we started working with this idea of Monami and towards my freelance consultation work, I never looked back, and I'm more settled this way. So this is my story. But for the rest of the workforce, those are still with the organization, there has to be some mechanism for them. So for our leaders, what do you say that these are some tools and techniques which if managers would follow, it would help them to better connect with their employees?
Absolutely, Priyanka. I think, I think we start right from ourselves first before we get on to what the organization can do for you. I think the first step to take is what can we do for ourselves? And what I really mean by that is that, there needs to be a lot of self-awareness with individuals in terms of, what is it that they really want. Increasingly in my coaching career, I've found that there is a lot of distortion and there is a lot of misalignment in terms of, what is it that they represent as an individual, as a professional? What are the goals they're really truly seeking? And I find that, it's to a very large extent, it's really about the flavor of the day. So, you kind of just float and you flow down a certain path because, you're assured of an occupation or a role or a job mandate with an organization. So there is the fact that you keep your job. But, more often than not, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, and if you're not completely in sync, if your DNA is not completely in sync with the role that you do, the behaviors you're expected to exhibit, it's going to lead to a lot of frustration. So more so now in the post-pandemic, I'm trying to be optimistic and call it post-pandemic. But in the post-pandemic era, I think people really need to be aligned to what do they stand for. And I would therefore recommend, for organizations to seriously invest into the learning and development portal of their structure. I think it's extremely important, to provide coaching. I think it's extremely important to provide mentorship. I think it's extremely important for organizations to provide, the flexibility to their employees to work, in areas which kind of ignite their passion and ignite their thing. It's so important for people to invest into areas where they can upskill their talent and actually go for systems and process and go for roles, which really, really are, is exciting for them. So I think, the whole bit around learning and development, coaching, mentoring, creating that self-awareness in terms of what is it that they really want, that is critically important for leaders to get onto them. The other thing is that, I think for organizations is that, you need to provide growth opportunities for your individuals. You need to take care of those growth opportunities. So whether it is about, the end of the year appraisals, being honest and truthful about that and making that work, or whether it is about, posting, getting onto the internal job posting and doing it really well, because more often than not, these internal job postings are never carried out the way they're supposed to be carried out. But I think, if you can really do that and match the individual personality and the individual traits, both functional and behavioral, with the role in hand, and provide those opportunities to employees and be transparent about them, I think that is another thing, which would really go well with employees. And I think organizations really need to look at that. The third is really, company culture. I think you really need to invest into your organization in terms of the culture bit, right? You need to have a purpose. You need to have a vision, a mission, right? You need to be able to communicate that well. And more importantly, you need to be able to walk the talk, in the sense that, if you're talking about integrity, if you're talking about, ethics, and you need to be able to walk the talk. And it starts with the leadership. It starts with managers. You need to demonstrate that for organizations, because that creates a sense of trust, and people know that, this is an organization which is wedded to their philosophies. Um, and now I think particularly important in today's day and age, I think is, organizations really need to be able to focus a lot around employee welfare, well-being and mental fitness, all of that, not only for the individuals, but also for their families. How can I safeguard my employees' interests? And how can I take care of them so they're not preoccupied by this, and they can focus completely and totally on the work on hand? So, and finally, I think, you need to be able to take care of the folks, while your great resignation is happening and all of that, and you're on a massive rehiring spree, there are lots of folks who are staying back.
Right.
And these are good people, and you need to, just because they're staying back doesn't mean that they don't have the opportunities. They've stayed back, and I think it's only incumbent for the organization to take care of them and to make sure that there's fairness in the way they are treated, whether it is in terms of compensation packages, or whether it's in terms of the flexibility angle, or whether it's in terms of, providing them all the perks and privileges, which new hires would get. More often than not, when you go in and you start hiring new people, the ones who stayed back very often tend to get overlooked. And I don't think that's a fair thing to do.
So actually, you have also touched upon the next question, which I was about to ask, about the existing employees. There are people, they're staying back with the organization. They're there from past 15 years, and they're good with the organization. They don't want to leave. So yes, we do have to take care about them with compensation from extra benefits. Taking care of their family along with them is something, yes, we need to look upon. And with that, I'm coming to the next question. So this is about 2020 and 2021. How do you see culture of work 2025? So your view on the future of work 2025, what do you think?
I think, if you want to really look at it from a very high level, let's look at what are we facing today. I think the power is shifted. It has shifted from organizations to employees, right? Mm-hmm. It's shifted from me to we, right? And you would also find that, it's no longer about executive leadership. It's more about, enterprise leadership. So there's that huge, shift which has happened. Now, in the context of all of that, what does that really mean? It means a lot of things. For example, it means that, there is going to be a lot of change coming in as we progress into the world. And therefore, whether it is in terms of climate change, or whether it's in terms of digital disruption, or whether it is in terms of, global shortages, supply chain issue, whatever, there are going to be a lot of changes coming up at a global level, and complex ones at that. So I think the future is going to be about reinventing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to be, how can I do this a little better? What can I do to avoid this, avoid this challenge in the future? It's going to be about reinventing, and reinventing proactively. So you don't wait for the problem to arise. You sort of get into it in advance. So I think that's something which organizations will really need to focus on in terms of building that ability and that mindset of being curious and being and challenging the existing status quo. I think that is going to be extremely important, when you look at the future of work. The second is that, if you really look at it with all the great resignations happening, this is one episode which has happened, but with all these changes coming up, there's going to be a shortage. I think there is going to be a shortage of talent, appropriate talent, right, coming up, because things are only going to get more complex. Yeah. And therefore, the concept of, hiring generally is not going to be there. I think hiring will become more strategic, and it will become more definitive, and more specific, right? Today we are equipped with, with tools which can go very deep into a person's behavior, his leadership style, the leadership styles, their professional abilities. All of that can be, you can do very deep dives into that. The whole concept of interviewing is changed. Today, there is more accountability in how you hire, right? It's not because, the guy gets grilled by 6 people on the same questions, over and over again, but that doesn't really give you anything. You can actually get into more strategic hiring. So that's going to be, so talent, getting good quality talent in the future is going to be a bit of a challenge. So you need to invest into your existing talent, retain them, and upskill them, for the future to come. The other is really about, creating sustainability, for your employees in terms of talent. So, people are you need to create a mindset, a long-term mindset. People need to be motivated and aligned for the long haul and not for the short haul. How do you do that? You need to make sure expectation levels. I mean, number one, for starters, you need to make sure that the talent role fit is perfect. Perfect in the sense that, it matches. The individual is as excited about the role as the role is excited to have the person on board to work on it, right? So that's one. The second is really about, setting clear expectations. You know it, Priyanka. How many organizations are employees completely clear about, what is expected of them? I mean, besides the end of the year business plans or goals, I mean, what next? What is it that drives this business? How many people are really invested in truly understanding the business side of it? It doesn't matter which function you work in, but if you don't understand, what your organization stands for and what it's doing, there is no way that, you can really, really deliver and contribute as effectively. The third is really about, individuality. I think employees are going to exceedingly demand and look forward to individual experiences, right from the time they apply to the time they retire, each touch point, what was their experience about with the organization? So you organizations really need to work on it and make those touch points as exciting as possible, right? The other thing is about accountability. I mean, I can go on, but accountability, for example, corporate accountability, there is a corporate accountability is really all about, increased transparency, in that relationship between the organization and the employee. Increased accountability, the leadership accountability. So, the leadership is committed to managing and navigating through a more agile and a more fluid workforce. And how do you kind of, drive that accountability? And finally, individual accountability. The individual accountabilities make their, individuals are going to be increasingly interested in making their own decisions. They don't want that top-down kind of a thing, which they were used to in the past. But now they suddenly experience autonomy, and they suddenly realize that they can do their own thing and they can make their own decisions. And that's so much more better than somebody breathing down your neck, right? So That is going to be the other touch point. So, I mean, I'm just talking to you about some of the things, which will constitute the future of the workforce. And finally, of course, not to forget automation. I think you need to be digitally savvy because that is the future. That's what it's going to be.
Right. So thank you so much, Ashok, for adding so much value on the leadership style and what all we can do to invest in our leaders or managers.